Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Um, I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done today, and I've been meaning to. And at the last show, I picked up a couple of shark's teeth. They're fossil shark's teeth, so they're kind of interesting to me. I'm going to try and create kind of a bezel cap for the top of one of them. I'll show you both of them before we get started, but I picked the one that's more kind of a traditional looking shark's tooth. So I'll be curious if anybody knows what kind it is. I'd like to know. Looking at the pictures online, it looks like it might be a great white tooth, but I'm not sure. There's some subtle variations that I don't pick up on. So if you're a paleontologist who specializes in shark's teeth, tell me in the comments. I'm curious what you know about it and how old it is and things. Before we do that, though, I need to thank some people. First, my patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I have a couple of new ones, Ashton G and ET. Thank you for signing up. I do appreciate your support. I think you'll find that it's a great group of people over there with a lot of knowledge who are willing to share it. So it's a great artistic sort of community. I really appreciate all of their support and the community that they've built there. So thanks for that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 24,100, I believe. That's an awesome and amazing number. Thank you for that. I never expected that I'd have that big of a following on YouTube, but thanks for that. One of the real joys for me in doing this is reading some of the nice comments that I get from you. And I've had some really touching ones lately. People who've told me that I've helped them to rekindle their creativity or those kinds of things really help to make me feel like I'm doing some good here. So thanks for that. I do also appreciate the kind contributions like the Buy Me a Coffees, the super thanks, people buying my ebooks or my merch. That really makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your help. So thanks for that. All right, well, let's get started on the shark's tooth piece. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks you can get on my merch store. There's a number of different versions. This one has got a nice convenient gauge to inches to millimeters chart, which I use pretty frequently. The key feature for me, though, is the dot matrix in the background. It helps me to draw better pictures because I don't draw very symmetrically sometimes. And I really like having a record of what I've made in case I want to go back and revisit that project or see, what kind of wire I used, or size of the stone that I used for that particular one, or whatever. It's nice to have a record of that. So get yourself one or two of those. I think they're handy. So here's the shark's tooth. This is the one that I chose, but here's the other one just for giggles. This one is interesting in that it's got a little tooth on either side of it, and it's got a distinctive curve. I don't know what kind it is. It could even be an extinct species. But again, if you're a fossil shark's tooth expert, let me know about these. I'm curious. Or if you go collecting these anywhere, I'm always interested to find out where you can find things like this. I bought these. I think these ones came from Morocco, probably. But so I chose this one because it's a little bit more traditionally shaped. And what I'm going to do is create kind of a bezel cap that goes over this rough part here. And if you notice, it's got kind of a distinct line that almost comes down in the middle here and goes back up and then curves up. So it's got a dip right here kind of at the center, and it curves back up. Dip here, curves back up. So we're going to make a piece of sheet, sterling, and hopefully it'll be like that. I made a prototype out of copper just to see if I could get it, if I could figure out the right shape. And this is it, believe it or not. Let's make sure I'm bending this the right way. But what I did was I lined this up in the center there and kind of figured out where I wanted to cut it along there. And then I bent it around like this. I used copper for the prototype because it's so malleable. And when I initially did it, this was rectangular. And so I kind of sketched out what I wanted it to look like. And it ended up with this. Now, I'll be having to do some squeezing down of this when I do the actual silver one. So I want to be a little careful because I don't want to damage the fossil. So this is one of the few kinds of things where I will have to use some adhesive. There's just not a very good way to hold these unless you're doing wire wrap or something like that, but I think this will look pretty nice. I am going to also, I picked out a little opal. I thought the color of this was silver. This is a nice kind of reddish Ethiopian opal. And I thought it would look nice with this. See that? So it's 5 millimeters, and we'll just make a little bezel, put it right in the center of this thing after we make it out of silver. And then once I get this to be nice and symmetrical up top here, so it's a nice curve that works for what we're doing here, we'll put a cap of silver, and I'm probably going to use 22 gauge on the top of this just to give it some strength. We'll solder a little, like a partial jump ring on here, and I already made a little sandwich bail like this. If you're interested in seeing how to make that type of bail, I have a video about that. You can make them kind of whatever shape you want, but it's the basic style that I like to make sometimes. It looks pretty clean and nice. So I just made one that's kind of shark tooth shaped. It's a little bit bigger than this one, but I think it'll work great. So to start with, I'm going to flatten this back out, and we're going to cut a piece out of silver, and I'm going to use 26 gauge here. The other materials I'm going to use for the bezel, it's going to be 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which is 4.76 millimeters. It's 26 gauge, which is 0.41 millimeters. This is going to be 26 gauge as well, this sterling sheet we're going to use here, and that's 0.41 still. This was 22 gauge on the bail, which is 0.66 millimeters, I believe. This will probably be 16 gauge ring, which is 1.3 millimeters. And I think that's everything. Like I said, I might put a 22 gauge sheet on the top. So, but I think let's start by finding some 26 gauge sheets. Let's see if we can. I could make a template out of that out of paper, but I'm just going to flatten this back out again, I think. I haven't decided whether I'm going to decorate this at all. I kind of feel like it might be a little plain if I don't. But again, I don't want to take away from the coolness of the fossil. You know? I imagine if you want to wear a fossilized shark's tooth, you want to look pretty tough. I mean, otherwise, what's the point, really? Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to get it up here as close as I can. I'm going to try and kind of trace it with a sharp object. So let's use my pick. So the way I got to this shape, though, was kind of trial and error to make it fit that particular one. So this particular shape is not going to fit every shark's tooth. You'd have to individually make it for each one. You know, and this one may not even be perfect. In fact, I know it's not perfect. We'll see. We'll adapt it as we go. Okay, so I got a pretty good outline there. And I think I'm just going to go and cut that out with the saw. What do you think? Oh, I'm going to ask you to forgive my mess over here. We're having some work done in our basement, so everything's a mess. Using a 00. All right, let's go back and get that cleaned up and shaped a little better even. Okay, so we got kind of that spot's right there, kind of. So let's see if we can kind of get it started to shape around here. I'm going to try and move the metal inwards as close as I can so I can get a pretty accurate kind of fit. I'm going to bend this one down a little bit like that. That's pretty good, actually. So I think I'm going to scribe a line across this here. And then I think I should trim that off, and I think we should solder this closed. So let's do that next. If you're new to my channel, I use hard silver sheet solder primarily. I will occasionally use some paste solder anymore. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. My torch is a Silversmith acetylene air torch, and it draws atmospheric air through the hole here to mix with the gas in the nozzle. It's not as hot as oxyacetylene, but it's hotter than a butane or a propane generally. So I think it's a good match for silversmithing. I use a #1 tip generally too. Let's make sure these ends are pretty straight. Really, when you're going to solder these, you want these pushing together pretty well, so that under the heat, when it does relax, as it anneals a little bit, you will not have them pull apart. Got a little bit of hard solder that I was using earlier when I was making the bail. Let's put a couple of pieces across this gap. The only thing that can go wrong here is if you heat it unevenly and then one side of the gap reaches 1450 degrees prior to the other one, and so if you do that, it'll jump onto one side. So you want to heat the entire piece until it just puddles like that. That's pretty good, but now I need to make sure that I have a nice curve up here, so I'm going to spend a little time doing some smoothing. Sort of smooth that out a little bit with the Dremel, and I cut a piece of 22 gauge that's long enough, but we need to curve it so it fits on there nicely. So wrap it around something that's a little bit rounded. Let's try my water bottle here. You can use my bench pad if I wanted to. Plus we're a little bit too far. Now we're starting to get close. I think that's probably close enough, so I'm going to set it up there like that. And we're going to flux it and put a little bit of solder on the inside. See if we can't get that to stick down. Few of these pieces in there. We'll have some in there. Let's see if we can't get that to flow, and then see if we need any gap repair here. Cool that off. I know I got at least a gap on this side here that I need to address. You get something like that, a lot of times you're not quite touching, and so make sure this is still going to fit okay. Sure it will. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can get the rest of that gap closed. I'm just going to flux it and throw a couple more pieces of solder over in that area. Just going to trim off the excess here. So it'll be hard to cut this part in the middle out on either side with the shears because of the curve, and so I'm going to use my saw to cut those out, but you already saw me saw one, so you probably don't need to see me saw again. I'll be right back. So I got that kind of cleaned up with the Dremel a little bit after filing. Now this is going to be going in here, kind of like that. So we need to figure out kind of where the central point is going to be. So I'm going to be putting a bezel right there. So we're going to need a ring up top there too. But that'll give me kind of a gauge for where to put that. So let's make that bezel real quick. So I don't need it to be quite this tall, so I probably will cut it down a little bit. Having some allergy issues today. Let's make a little circle here. Make a little scratch just beyond where they meet. It's about 2 millimeters. Whenever I solder bezels, I usually make them into an angular shape, like a square or a rectangle. It allows me to get a better solder joint generally. If you're new to this, you want to push them past each other a little bit so that you got a little bit of forward pressure on them, because when the metal relaxes under the heat, you don't want it to pull apart and leave a gap, which it has a tendency to do. Okay, let's reshape this into a circular shape. You can use a jump ring mandrel if you want to, or a bezel mandrel or whatever. Use your, if you got some bail making pliers, those sometimes work pretty well for this. If you got a little stone like this. Alright, let's check our size. That's about right. I feel like this surface is probably smooth enough to where we don't have to do too much. It's going to have a tendency to slide a little bit, so let's maybe use a softer pad. I'm going to put it like that. There's a lot more mass in the bottom piece than there is in the top piece, and so we're going to need to pump some heat into that first, because it takes longer for that one to get up to the 1450 degrees that it takes for hard silver sheet solder to flue. So the tooth is going to need to be epoxied in there, and I'll probably do that later on off camera. But I'm really going to load that up with a lot of epoxy and use some what do you call it, acetone to get rid of any excess. But I will set the opal before we're done. So we need to get that on here. Here's the little kind of shark tooth shaped bail. This one kind of curves this way, so I kind of like how it curves that way. I could do it the other way. I think I like it better this way. But we need to add that ring, so let's try and center it over the stone here. Here's some 16 gauge round. So I kind of want more of a U shape, honestly. That seems to be a good size to me. So I'm going to solder one side of it on, and then we use some medium solder or something to solder it closed. That way we don't run the risk of having this attach accidentally to something that we don't want it to. And I think let's just pick a little bit of solder on there. If you've never seen pick soldering, it's a useful skill. I have a good video about it right there. You should check it out. It's one of those things that kind of level you up as a silversmith, I think, if you learn how to do it. We'll just pick a little bit of solder up on the end of that. Get a little solder attached to the other end. Again, there's a huge disparity in mass here, so. That's pretty good. So let me find some medium solder here, and I'm just going to put a little bit on where that comes together. You're hanging it like that. So let's let that pickle for a while, and then I'll set that stone after I polish it, and we'll show you how it looks. So. Okay, I got things polished up. We're ready to set this stone. I've got it filed to the height I need it to be. I do this a little differently than some people do. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers, which I've polished up a little bit, as my bezel pusher. So we get it pretty down against there. I'm going to use the rounded outer part here to burnish. And that's just rubbing that top edge really. Some elbow grease. I wonder if any young people would recognize that idiom. You need to use some elbow grease. So, like I said, I'll be kind of loading up the cavity here with some clear epoxy. Then I'll get that stone popped in there. But I'll probably take pictures before I even epoxy it, just because it's nighttime, it's late. And Chad needs his beauty sleep. We'll get that put onto a chain and I'll get some better pictures. And I'll see you on the next one. Okay, well that was how to set a shark's tooth pendant. I hope you enjoyed that piece. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. That really helps my channel get promoted, and I do really appreciate that. I'd also love it if you left a comment and maybe visited my main channel page on YouTube here. I have 540 plus videos now. I do 3 per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. So there's a ton of content there, and I think you're almost certain to find something else useful or interesting over there. So check a few of those out. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There's no fee for that, and it does really help me out. And don't forget to visit the video description down below. There's some important links in addition to information about the video. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that nice community. There's multiple tiers of membership, the lowest being where you just get rid of the YouTube advertisements. And then some of the other ones have additional perks like special tutorials made just for Patreon and live streams and things like that. So check those things out. Maybe sign up. I'd love to see you over there as well. If you want one of those nice design idea sketchbooks, there's a link to my merch store, and there's also some other things there, but I do find those super useful. It's my most popular item there. And then finally, there's a link to my ebooks, particularly my 2024 tutorial guide. That has a page for each of the videos I did last year, and on each page it has a link to the video. It also has additional information about the video, including the sketch that I drew, the final product that came out of it, a list of materials, the difficulty rating, and some notes that I made regarding the piece itself or the process of making it. So there's, did I like it? Did I not like it? Why? And did I learn anything from the process of making this one, which oftentimes I do? And what would I do different if I was to do it again? So some of those sorts of things, or any other relevant information that comes to mind when I'm thinking about those projects. I think you'll find it's a nice way to have a whole bunch of projects at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel. So check that out. There's also the one from 2023, and there's even a package deal if you get both of them. So thanks for that in advance. All right, well, thank you for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.